Hi Shazoolo, this is part 2 of my response to your video about the vampire community and Christian perspective. So I'm sorry I had to break the video off rather abruptly yesterday, but this camera on this computer can only capture about 15 minutes and then it dies. So yeah. So let's continue. I've been talking about sanguine vampires, those that drink blood, and psychic vampires who drain life force without using a physical medium to carry it. And there are also sexual vampires, sometimes called tantric vampires, that drain life force through sexual activities. Now, what these three groups have in common is that they are considered vampiric. Not all of the vampire community is vampiric. Vampiric means that you drain life force in some way or another. And there are many speculations as to the reason of this. Some think it's a condition of the soul, that vampiric individuals have a different kind of soul than a normal human being. Some think that people that are vampiric are affected by spirits or other entities that can be draining. Some think that trauma or illness have caused the energy system to go out of whack. There are a lot of theories, and I really could go on and on and on about this. But instead of making this a long discussion about the various debated reasons for being vampiric, I can explain a little bit about myself in this. I think that the reason why I am an energy thief, as I prefer that term actually to vampire for this, is that, and this is of course just a theory, it might be completely wrong, but I almost died before I was born. My mother had a very difficult pregnancy, and she almost lost me once, and also the placenta failed, so I wasn't getting any nourishment, or at least very little of it. So my mother had to stay the last month of the pregnancy in the hospital, as I had to be able to start the birth as soon as the placenta failed completely. So yeah, when I was born, I was so thin they couldn't use normal diapers. I couldn't cry, and yeah, but of course I did recover. I wasn't any permanent damage, at least not physically. However, I think this is part psychological and part energy based problem. I think that an embryo can think and feel. This is part of the reason why I have a problem with abortion, because I think we don't know when a developing child will start to develop emotions, will start to think. I know that I have memories from before I was 6 months old, and if a baby can think, then I think that at least in some development stages an embryo can too. Though of course it doesn't have the ability to understand as a older individual have. So yeah, I think that deep down in my subconscious, that desperate need for nourishment, that the fear of starving to death has created some damage. And I think that partly this is the reason why I overeat, and also the reason why I collect, like you commented on how many books I have. This this is the top of the iceberg. I'm a pack rat. So yes, I think that that need to draw to me stems from that. But I also think that my brush with death before I was even born, and the lack of nourishment, has created some damage to my energy system. Remember, I'm very into the Asian concept of chi, and I think that something like that could easily damage the meridians, which is the energy channels that go around the body like blood veins, and delivers vital energy to, well, our entire system. And I think that is the reason why I have that draining effect on those around me. However, like I said, there are many theories, and the most common one is actually the concept of it being a condition of the soul. So yeah, and this leads me to a point that I also wanted to mention, that the way you speak about it, it indicates that you think that then the vampire community is one tightly knit community. It isn't, because there are a lot of different directions, groups, beliefs, and so on within the vampire community. And not all of these groups get along. Like, for example, just within the otherkin version of it, with otherkin I mean those that think that vampiric individuals have a non-human soul. You have those that draw from the writings of Michel Balanger. I'm not sure if I pronounced that name right. And you have those that belong to the Aset Ka, which is a vampire religion, basically. And they argue like you wouldn't believe. And you also have that those that are vampiric have a tendency to look at lifestylers as role players, and the lifestylers look at those that are vampiric and see them as stuck up, and so on and so on. This is not a tightly knit community. It is more like when you have a group of people from all over the world that has similar interests and beliefs, and those interests and beliefs are relatively rare. Of course, you do find together in some format, but there are no vampire community that says this and says that and represent all of us. Okay, let's move on with the definitions. Okay, besides those that are vampiric, you also have archetypical vampires. These are people that uses an occult technique to assume the vampire archetype. This is very similar to the Asian concept in martial art, for example, to try to emulate animals to gain their strengths. It is believed that if you emulate something, then you will connect with the energy of that thing and gain those characteristics. Like for example, there are this um, Taoist fable that there were a family that were exploring caves near their home, and the cave there was a cave in, so they were trapped and they had no food and only a very little water. So they assumed that we're done for. But here comes a turtle, and I see that the turtle do this, mm, pressing its neck in and having that movement and doing very little, only putting its head forward to lick in some drops of water now and then. And the family thought that, oh, the turtle live very long lives, so they started doing that too. And 800 years later, the cave was excavated and they found the family still alive, having emulated turtles and gained longevity because that is associated with the turtle. And of course, this is a fable, but you get the point. So some will emulate the characteristics of being a vampire as an occult tool to gain that to gain the vampire's characteristics. I'm very interested in this, and while I haven't started yet, it is something that I've considered doing. You also mention life extension and eternal life, and I seem to be running out of time here, but I can just cover this really quickly. I too believe that there are a religious afterlife, that our souls move on. However, those that are interested in finding eternal life, they are after eternal physical life, that this flesh will live on forever. Now, this is absolutely nothing that the whole of the vampire community is into. So, yeah, for example, those that are vampiric, they have a tendency to, I guess, live a little bit longer than others, in that vampiric individuals are often very healthy if they feed regularly, and you do gain some extra life force, so that will usually add to health and longevity, but these people still age and die. However, some people that are into the archetypal vampire are trying to achieve immortality. So that's one little group within those that are into archetypes. Some are also into the beauty of the vampire, trying to achieve that, the elegance, and so on. There are a lot of motivations. But yeah, life extension is one of them, and is one of those that I'm most interested in. But yeah, that's the archetypical, those that try to embrace the vampire archetype. These people, some of them are vampiric, but not all. It's more like accepting and trying to immerse yourself in that archetype to gain its energies, and by that its qualities. So yes, then I have to round this out for this time, and I will see you back in part 3. Have a great day.